Hello and welcome to Green Healing, where we discuss alternative and natural healing from abuse, trauma, and CPTSD. Today, I'd like to discuss the similarities and differences between chronic fatigue syndrome and adrenal fatigue, aka burnout. While the two are different illnesses, a lot of the symptoms are very similar, if not exactly the same. There are some symptoms that are a bit different, and the main difference is how you get each of these illnesses. When we heal from abuse and trauma, or when we are still experiencing abuse and trauma, it is also very possible to experience extreme fatigue. So, chronic fatigue syndrome comes from an illness when you are ill and then you can suddenly get it, almost as though for no reason, following a severe illness. Some might say that it's after an illness that really overworked your immune system, though it is disputed. While burnout, adrenal fatigue, comes mainly being overworked and from psychological reasons. Also, it doesn't come suddenly. One day you're fine and the next day you have it, like chronic fatigue syndrome. Burnout, adrenal fatigue is slowly over time, day by day, more and more, but very in a sinister way. I did not notice the symptoms right away until I was completely burnt out and whoa, it was too late. My immune system was crashing. Adrenal fatigue is also from repetitive stress, and the adrenal system, the immune system, has difficulty coping. Another difference in symptoms is that with chronic fatigue syndrome, you may experience extreme dizziness, and while both have abdominal and chest pains, there will be joint pain in the arms and legs for chronic fatigue syndrome. Burnout, adrenal fatigue, will cause the immune system to crash, especially at the beginning. And that will cause illnesses like fever, infections, cold flu type infections, bronchial infections, or even vomiting, such illnesses as that, because the immune system doesn't know how to cope, so there's a huge crash. Those are the main differences. The symptoms that are similar is chronic fatigue, sleep that doesn't make you feel rested when you wake up, sleep disorders, restlessness, brain fog, so difficulty with focus, difficulty with concentration. Another difference is chronic fatigue syndrome will have sometimes impairments with memory and such, which if you have enough brain fog might bring an onset of forgetfulness as well if you're too tired from adrenal fatigue, but that is one of the more extreme symptoms. There's also doing exercises or exerting yourself, not over exertion that will make you ill, like with burnout, but just an exertion, a slight overexertion, and you may have heart palpitations. You may be extremely out of breath, like going up a flight of stairs, trying a workout, trying, to lift something that is heavy and just having a bit of difficulty breathing at times, just a heavy feeling also. Abdominal and chest pain, that is the same for both. Being exhausted, extremely exhausted all the time, not having energy to do anything, feeling tired all the time, and just low energy. While some symptoms are disputed, another similar symptom is either weight gain or weight loss in the extreme amounts for both. Though some will argue that there's more weight gain with adrenal fatigue, except I lost weight with adrenal fatigue very fast. So quick weight gain or quick weight loss with both. Another common symptom is a sore throat and flu-like symptoms, what I personally call feeling iffy. The difference comes with the cause. Symptoms can be Symptoms can be mild or lead to actual cold or flu with burnout because the immune system is Symptoms can be mild or lead to actual cold or flu with burnout because the immune system is strained. Okay, we'll go with that. Symptoms can be mild or lead to actual cold or flu with burnout because the immune system is strained. A lot of the symptoms of both overlap and a lot of them are disputed. So it can be a bit confusing to figure out which a person has because unless you see someone who is professionally qualified to diagnose these illnesses, quizzes online aren't going to be very accurate because of the similar symptoms. I did 2 different quizzes for chronic fatigue syndrome, and all the questions, they said that I was very likely to have it, and all the questions were asking about symptoms that are exactly the same as I experienced with burnout. So a lot of overlapping symptoms. And so it is more, if you're self-diagnosing, it's more difficult to figure out which you have. The best indication is, did it come suddenly, one day to the next, after an illness? Or did you, when you think back, do you kind of notice the symptoms growing over time until suddenly it's like, whoa, I'm burnt out. Where it seems, where did this come from? But when you think back, oh yeah, I was feeling dizzy after this. I almost lost consciousness because I was overworked. I had a caffeine or sugar low and it was more extreme than usual. I had to take a nap or, things like that over time. Or I had a migraine after a stressful situation, especially if you experience psychological issues like CPTSD and you've experienced abuse and trauma. It's most probably adrenal fatigue burnout. Of course, I'm not qualified to diagnose you, and this is not medical advice. Obviously, this is just based on my knowledge from reading research papers, boring research papers, but I was very curious about it because someone I know has chronic fatigue syndrome while I have burnout, and a lot of our symptoms are the same. So I was very curious about this. So it's important to understand the differences and similarities. I believe personally that it's possible to have both. Some experts will say that it's possible to have both. It's possible to start with burnout, and because burnout causes symptoms that, like a major crash of the immune system when you overwork yourself, especially at the beginning when you first start being burnt out, it could also cause chronic fatigue syndrome. And both seem to be everlasting. They last a long time, as in not just a few weeks or a few days or a few months, like a few years to many years even. So that's another similar symptom. Another difference, however, is that chronic fatigue syndrome doesn't seem to be widely recognized. A lot of people think that it can't be quite as identified as burnout, and some people even call it like a fake illness and things like that. I don't believe that is the case. I think that a chronic fatigue syndrome is very real, and it's important to have an illness that can be distinguished, that has the exact same symptoms as burnout, but that can be distinguished from burnout because it's caused by something else. It's brought on by something else, even if the symptoms are very similar and overlap. So it's good that they're the distinguishable 2 illnesses for 2 different causes. Adrenal fatigue / burnout is more widely recognized and more widely understood. It's good to know the difference. It's good to know the similarities and to understand both, because we can wonder, do I have this? Do I have that? Do I have both? And it's quite possible. So if you suspect, those quizzes online, they're fun to do, but they aren't very accurate. So my best advice, not medical advice, but from a human being to another human being, is that you seek professional help to diagnose if you suspect that you have the one or both of these illnesses and you can't work. And also it's important to keep in mind creative fatigue. Speaking about fatigue, which also has similar symptoms, but creative fatigue is one of those red flags, those early signs that if you don't change your habits, you might end up burnt out. So one of those things to look out for, because burnout, it's not all clear cut, it's not all the same, but there are different stages where you start being more tired. Caffeine doesn't do its thing. A caffeine low, it hits you hard. I can't take caffeine anymore at all. I became intolerant to caffeine and having more difficulty getting up in the morning, needing to sleep, restlessness, waking up in a panic. That could also be a sign of burnout because of the anxiety from the trauma that you've experienced. That happens to me a lot. And sleeping disorders, those are for both sleeping disorders. The sleeping disorders that I have are somnophobia, the fear of falling asleep, and insomnia, the incapability of falling asleep. So all in one cluster. But there are other sleeping disorders. Maybe I'll do another episode on sleeping disorders to specifically go into the different ones. But this is it. The differences and similarities of chronic fatigue syndrome and adrenaline fatigue, aka burnout. Let me know in the comments of this episode if you've experienced one or the other, or both even, or if you suspect that you have one or the other or both. Let me know that. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you for watching. If you're listening to it on the podcast form, thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to support Green Healing, there's the Elements Healing Music with Singing Bowl. There's also the PayPal tip jar, and there's merchandise, t-shirts in the merch store. And as always, empower yourself and be emotionally free.